Didn't come out very good, sorry. So this was a request from LaRosa with Fina. It's a limited valet parking time, Thursday through Sunday, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's a distance of about 66 feet using the town bylaw parallel parking guide. It is basically from the crosswalk going southbound for 66 feet from 5 to 11. I'm sorry, 5 to 10. That's incorrect. It's 5 to 10 p.m.
5 to 10?
5 p.m. to 10, Thursday through Sunday. It says 11.
Or it says Thursday to Saturday also.
Okay, it's the wrong slide I brought, I'm sorry, but it's Thursday through Sunday, right, Paul?
Yeah, so we're asking for Thursday to Saturday.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Paul LaRosa, owner of Fina restaurant, owner of LaRosa's as well. So what we're asking for is we intend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is intended to be our busiest nights of the week. Right now we have a 135-seat restaurant with the patio there. So we'd like to have valet access some of the spaces from 5 to 10 on those nights. We intend to use the valet spaces for both La Fina as well as LaRosa's. LaRosa's is an 85-seat restaurant, so effectively we're intending to use the valet for about 215 seats. We do have the private lot in back of 27 Main Street, which pretty much is completely cleared out after 5 o'clock. We don't know how many people would actually park back there to come to dinner versus parking on the street. I think certainly everybody would take on-street parking or parking in the parking lots first. By providing valet, we think that people will come, drop the car in valet, which we are paying for, so it's free to customers of La Fina or LaRosa's. And then we'll have the lot to park essentially 80 cars in or so in the evening, which will alleviate some of the parking on Main Street for some of the other businesses. That's kind of what I have to say. Our intention is obviously, in the event that we're incredibly busy Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe we come and we ask again and say, hey, the valet has been an incredible success. We've alleviated a lot of cars off the road. We're incredibly busy on these nights as well, and we'd like to run it for more successive nights as well in the future. But for now, we do want to run it for our busiest nights.
There is one other spot in town on Essex Street in front of Andolini's. There's 60 feet of valet parking there on a limited time basis as well. So this isn't the first one in town. Not that they use it anymore, but there is, it's still posted. It did, it's
Sounds good right now.
on the traffic rules and regulations in town.
So now I just have a question about the valet parking more so than the actual location. Is there a process that is gone through by the valet parking? Do we ensure, for example, that they have insurance for doing valet parking, that sort of thing?
I can answer that. The company is Boston Valet. Boston Valet does many of they're one of the #1 providers from the city. Their services, what we pay for, includes everything. Everybody is certified, licensed, insured. They take full responsibility. So that was a big thing for us, which is we didn't want to be responsible for people's cars if there was a traffic accident or anything like that. They take full responsibility for all of that. The gentleman, John, is more than happy, the owner of Boston Valet, is more than happy to provide any insurance certificates or anything like that that would need, should it be requested.
And does that not require an approval from the board to have valet parking?
It is.
Oh, we haven't approved it.
Well, Andolini's has been there for a long time.
No, I mean the actual, like, not the parking, but the actual service. Like, we do the limo service and all those sorts of things. But I've never seen anything with the valet service, so I'm assuming that we don't do that. Is that correct?
But I don't know the timing of when that decision was made for Andolini's.
We don't approve the service. So who Ms. LaRosa selects to use for his valet? That there's no local approval process for that.
There isn't because it's public space.
I don't think they're licensed. I think it's just basically a contractor of the restaurant.
Yeah. Is there any limitation, either with Andolini's or with this proposal, that it would be only be able to be used by one business?
That I'm not sure.
So what I can say is, obviously it comes at a significant cost to us, so for us, we'd like to be able to have patrons of our establishments to be able to use the service for free. There is provisions in, if we wanted to allow essentially anybody to park there and run on a voucher system, which means anybody that came to downtown Andover on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday could park in our valet. At that point, if you did not dine at LaRosa's, we could do a couple of things. We could either charge, and if you had a voucher from Fina or LaRosa's, you would get it completely complimentary, or in the event that you wanted to park, there could be a small fee or something like that. To be honest, we're not going to police it to the point of that. I think anybody that's parking there is probably going to come to one of our restaurants on those evenings, so we haven't even really thought about that, to be honest. And I don't know that it's that big of a deal.
Royal Jewelers does that a couple of times a year, where they have LA service, where they have...
A short period, though.
Just a couple of nights, I think, yeah.
I think the key is we're trying to take 60 to 70, 80 cars off of the street on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday versus having them park in the current public spaces. So it's entirely up to you guys, but in our opinion, to give us the 3 spaces to have a landing zone for those 60 to 70 cars on those nights, and to be able to have the private, safe lot that is lit in the back of the building, I think would be an advantage to the town.
Well, if somebody's coming to your restaurant, either of your restaurants, and they want to take advantage of the parking out behind, they can do that without using valet, right?
They certainly can, yes. If they like to, they can.
I guess my question is, if we decide to allow this, there's nothing in this that makes this particular to any establishment. So how does it work that any particular establishment would be able to use this area for valet parking? Like, if we allow it, it doesn't say we're allowing it for Fina and LaRosa's, or even for those particular locations, where those restaurants are.
I'm not sure you can exclusively say it, because it's a public street. You can make it valet, and they'll have the valet, but I'm not sure you can say that that space is exclusive for one business.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that.
I think you can make it valet, and then they're going to use valet, fine, but if Royal Jewelers wants to use it for valet, I think they'd be able to use it as well. It's a public street.
What I'm having problems with is foreseeing how one would manage that.
I totally agree with you. No, you bring up a valid point.
This is sort of a new thing. Obviously, Andolini's hasn't been a particularly big issue with the valet.
done it for years,
I've seen the valet sign, but I don't...
The other question I would have is, Paul, what would be your intention to, would you put sandwich boards out or some kind of signage for this?
So they have, what they have is essentially, it looks like this. And it'll say valet parking for LaRosa's or Fina. And that just sits on the sidewalk. And we would have something nicer than just a traditional cone that would block off those 4 spots. I'm sure there will have to be a post that has signage that says Thursday, Friday, Saturday, valet parking only from 5 to 10, which notifies anybody that might have parked there earlier that as of 5 o'clock, these spots are reserved for a valet parking loading zone.
We have the DPW post signs on the sidewalk, closest to the street for that.
Can I ask a question?
General,
1 minute?
as valet parking, not unique or exclusive, just for one business.
That's what the signage would say.
Right, but the practical, right, they're going
It
to...
would be difficult if it's one business who's paying for it and running it. If it was a town service per se, I could see us do that. But it's one business that we're effectively dedicating 3 or 4 spaces for.
Well, clearly, lots of towns and municipalities do this, so I don't want to try to reinvent the wheel. What is the practice in other places?
The belief is that it will mitigate traffic impacts associated with the operation of the restaurant. So by doing it, the board is allowing Fina to operate a valet in which people pull up and their car is moved. The next car pulls up, the car is moved, rather than have 50 cars, 60 cars in the course of a night looking for parking, coming up Barnard, down Park. This sends them to one place, and they have a designated place outside of the municipal setting for those cars. So I think the decision before the board is, are they going to allow them to do that or not? And if not, they'll be able to park behind the building or in a municipal lot. So those are really the options. It's not so much just giving them a service necessarily, but to mitigate the traffic impacts associated with having the business.
I guess to Annie's question, and I'm embarrassed, I don't know this, but in other municipalities that do have dedicated valet spaces, is it done by permit of a single restaurant, or is it done with a designated valet space that is shared?
It's been done based on an application from a specific business.
And we've
Andrew?
all had the experience of seeing the signs in other
Sure.
places that are specific to one restaurant. I don't think that's
Yeah.
new.
No, I guess the only reason I struggle is, and I like the idea, don't get me wrong, I think it could potentially help downtown, but if we do this for one business, what would stop it, every other business in downtown from coming in with a similar request? Andrew, are we being asked effectively for a one-year license? Is that and that would renew every year, or how does this work?
So I don't believe there's a term to this. It would just be in the traffic rules and regs, until which time the board decided to revoke it. So perhaps the board wants to do it on a 6-month basis.
That's
or
what I was just going to say, is could we do like a pilot?
Yes,
and
without a doubt.
see how it goes?
Does that work with your contract?
Whatever, I don't know what the term is.
I mean, I think a year would be an appropriate amount of time to be able to see fully the impact of it all. I mean, but I'm not gonna.
Keep in mind, the board can revoke it at any time, notwithstanding what's in the contract. So if you wanted to set up some parameters, you can, but ultimately your right to revoke has no limitations.
I'm interested in parameters. I'm also interested, we've got several folks I want to ask, so maybe Laura can open that up and then get back to us.
All right. Ms. Giffen?
Jane Giffen, Castle Heights Road. I'm concerned about the 5 o'clock, that the stores downtown are open until 6 o'clock. And I think it's a disservice to them that they might have to have their patrons go out, or they may have to move their car, because there's a reason it's 5 o'clock and not 6 o'clock when the other vendors are closing. Right.
Well, we open at 4 o'clock, so that would be probably one of the reasons why we were looking for the 5 o'clock. What I would also say is that I think we're not deterring people from using the valet to maybe even go to those stores.
But if someone's parked at 4 o'clock and they're having their hair done, not that I would ever spend that much time getting my hair done, but if somebody's spent 2 hours getting their hair done,
Right. It's going to get
they're going to get a ticket at 5 o'clock, and that's not fair. Our merchants downtown need every bit of help we can give them. And I'm not saying you're not a great...
No, I get it.
You're one of the lucky ones. There are other people that are struggling, and I don't think we should give them one iota of thing extra to worry about.
So, I beg to differ on that situation, which is the fact that I think Andover has gone through a period where many people have said that they don't like coming to Andover because there isn't enough parking. Many people have said they don't like coming to Andover because they get tickets too often. Many people don't like coming to Andover because they have to drive around too many times. We're essentially alleviating that issue from 5 o'clock on. I would do valet from 4, and remember, we're incurring all of the expense for that right now. I'd even say if we opened up at 4 o'clock for the valet, somebody could come, have a martini and an appetizer, and continue to go to one of the stores after, rather than just get right in their car. So there's businesses that are struggling. I'd say maybe we should stay open a little bit later and create a little bit more of a scene in this town so that people can go have dinner and continue about their day like they do in Newburyport, Amesbury, Salem, Massachusetts, and some of these other towns. I think to a certain extent, remember, if we're looking at just those 3 spots, that is only 3 spots, but I am going to take 80 cars out of those spots and put them behind the building.
I'm just concerned about people that are already parked there, and then at 5 o'clock, they're going to get a ticket or towed.
I think if we came to an agreement and I said, don't ticket the people that are parked there at 5 o'clock, would that satisfy something in that realm?
I think that's fairer than having people worry
I'm not
about...
looking, listen, I think at the end of the day, if I implored Glenn to go and ticket everybody that was parked there from 5 or on, the person's gonna walk in my front door and say, with many choice words, you ticketed my car, you son of a blah. And do you think that that's not good business for me either?
No, and it's not, but
I would come to that agreement and say, don't ticket the people, let's put
you
the signs
can't
up
tell-
and call it a day.
But if there's
But anyway.
appropriate signage and people know before their hair appointment or whatever, it's going to be cut off, they're going to choose a spot not
I
outside
don't know, I
those
just-
three. And I don't think the goal is to be punitive.
No, we're doing it actually for many reasons, obviously. We want our guests to be able to not drive around, not drive past us, to be able to pull right up and enjoy their experience. I think it adds to the experience. And remember, we have LaRosa's across the street that already has that happen where people do not have adequate parking close enough to our restaurant, so to say, right? Now, I don't mind walking 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and many people do not. I think, when Paul Matarazzo was outside, I was involved in all of the parking discussions of what's going on with the parking lots and things like that. And we have found that if people can't park fairly close, that it alters them. And maybe they do continue going. And I think that, like I said, we're not going to be petty on parking at La Fina and going to other places. Most people will end up at La Fina or LaRosa's at some point for a cocktail, dessert, appetizer or something. So, and if you leave my place and walk across the street and go to Pazza Pizza or you walk to Elm Square Oyster, that's perfectly fine. We're contributing to the downtown experience, which is, I think, is, at the end of the day, I open restaurants in this town because that's what I want, and I feel like the town has that potential to create something a little bit more. And I feel like if we can, for 3 public spots, to be able to open up 50 to 80 private spots where people will park. At the end of the day, people aren't going to park it behind the building and come up. They won't know about it or whatever. I think we're going to create a traffic flow and alleviate some of that pressure and create more people to stay in downtown.
All right, thank you. I have a couple other people who want to
Please.
comment, so, Mr. Coleman?
I'm very concerned, Route 28 is a state highway, and 528 is rush hour. And Glenn was good enough to put up 2 pedestrian signs. I've known him my whole life. And if you try to go across from Barnett Street in front of this new building, people are goes like bats out of hell. They're not going 20 and 30. And they're trying to beat the green light in front of Andover Bank.
And
So you're gonna have
Did you
those
bring that
valets
to
there in a rush, take his cars, they're gonna make a loop around Barnett Street, they're gonna have to go around Park Street. I used to be a valet. I know what they do in the south end of Boston. And there's plenty of parking for this guy at the public parking lot behind the old town building, across the street from the old town building, which used to be Purity Supreme. There's plenty of parking. And the gentleman knew when he rented this space what he was going to get. And Bertucci's did, and the new luxury restaurants, which are his competitors, at the municipal parking lot. And we have meters there too. I think that's what he's concerned about. But I know what a valet does. He is not going to be paying attention like a Domino pizza man. He's going to be going for a rush to get his tip. And where are you going to station the valet in front of the building? Is he going to be at a box with something to protect him if it's raining with an umbrella? Is he going to have a flag there? It is very narrow. I have a heck of a time taking my elderly mother from a car there to the Andover Bank. And Andover Bank is open late, BOA is open late, I think 1 or 2 nights a week. They're on either side of him. Their customers deserve those space. First come, first served.
All right,
You are,
thank you.
and this should be a bylaw. You are setting a poor precedent if you do it special for him. But when he rented that space, he knew what he was going to get. And he's lucky to have the 2 parking lots with the meters. You're welcome to them.
Mr. Coleman, thank you.
Thank you,
I have a
ma'am.
couple more people that wanted to speak. Mr. Pokers?
Bob Pokers, Cherrywood Circle. I agree with what Jane Giffen said a little while ago in terms of these being public spots right now. They're not private spots. There are people who come into town at the end of the day. I frequently come into the town after 5 p.m. based on my own work schedule, and I've parked in that particular area on numerous occasions because I'm running errands in that area to take what is currently a public resource and effectively dedicate it to one private entity, I think strikes me and many other people in town, if they knew about this, very, very wrongly. So I would urge the select board not to rush into making a decision on this, but to treat this almost like a zoning bylaw where you would study it, examine it, welcome public input before making a decision on it, because you're effectively talking about turning a public resource into a privately controlled resource, and that deserves more than 10 minutes of discussion at a single select board meeting.
Thank you. Yes, Pam?
Jen Tejan, Chestnut Street. I had a couple questions for him on, one, the number of spots and how just logistically they're going to mark that entire lot. Are they going to have a sign at the entrance and the exit or at all the spaces indicating that it becomes valet as of 5 p.m.? And
Talking about the
So
private spaces
the
out
parking in
behind.
the back?
the parking lot in the back. So I'm curious how many spots there are and then how they're actually going to notate that these are dedicated to valet. And then I'd be curious to know what they envision the traffic pattern. So there's been a couple other discussions here, but it sounds like, they would take a right on Chestnut, a right on Central, and then grab the car, come out of that one way. They're going to go down Chestnut again and circle around to the valet. So I'm curious to know what the traffic pattern is.
Paul Nealon reached out to me about making that a two-way on Chestnut Street, and I said you should probably do a traffic study of the area and make sure the turning, it's wide enough to make trucks be able to go inside and out of that before he makes any decision. So that's still under review.
Yeah. So I'd have a lot of concerns about the traffic there. I mean, Chestnut Street during that time gets really backed up at school drop-off, pickup, so those two times. And then traffic, which I would say is 4:15 to 6:15, that whole Chestnut Central Street corridor is a disaster. So I do have concerns about them coming down Chestnut, taking a right, rushing to get a car, going around. I'd like to know more about the traffic pattern and what the implications will be on that area. It's already
With all due
very
respect, in the
congested.
event that we had people and we made people go to the back lot, you would have the same amount of cars enter down Chestnut Street and come into that parking lot as if you had valet from our patrons. So if it was valet, they'd have to come down Chestnut Street and pull into the lot. If we told them to park in the back lot, they would have to come down Chestnut Street and pull into the back lot. So you would have essentially the same amount of traffic going through that area.
So another question for you though, so how are you going to notate that whole parking lot becomes valet?
The
So
whole parking lot is private to 27 and 45 Main Street.
Talking to the board.
but
And TD Bank exits, almost all of those spots are empty from 4 o'clock on,
what
as
about
well as the
Kid
law
Casso?
offices above it.
So what about Kid Casso and Sola Salon?
So yeah, there is the ability for those people to park there as well. But what we have found during their opening hours as well is that almost nobody, very rarely are the spots used. And that leads me to my first argument, which was that people aren't going to use the lot because they're going to park in the front on Main Street or in the public lots first before they go back in.
All right. Mr. Ham?
I have a couple of quick
Can you
questions.
just identify yourself again? I'm sorry.
One is, I sort of understand what you're talking about here, having lived here a long time and knowing how difficult it is to find a free parking place downtown. I just wonder what fraction of the total on-street parking, say on Route 28, are we talking about taking? What fraction of it?
I don't have the length. of the entire
Just give me
street.
a wag. It seems like to me you're taking 10 or 15% of it at least.
I would say more like 3%. I bet there's 100 spaces on,
Three spaces.
I'm talking about on the street, free spaces, that's what you're...
I'd say between Elm Square and Lock Street, there's got to be close to 100 parallel parking spaces. It's not lined, so there's not a specific number of spaces. That's why you don't line certain spots like that, because you can fit more cars as opposed to if you line them.
Where are these spaces, please?
I'm talking about the corridor between Elm Square and Lock Street, all of Main Street. There's, I haven't counted, but I bet there's 100 spaces. Taking up 3, that would be 3%.
Well, if that's true, then I'm not so concerned about it, but I do echo what Bob said. I bet this needs to be a bylaw. And all businesses who would be affected by this should have equal opportunity to go after this space.
Everyone should get it then. Yes.
Well, to that point, has anyone else applied for valet parking?
Maybe they haven't thought
No,
about
I
it.
looked through the traffic rules and regulations, and I only found Essex Street to be the other.
Right, so I mean, to be fair to Paul, other people have had the opportunity to apply on Main Street and have not done so.
And have applied on
Right.
another.
I haven't had any new
Right.
applications.
And have gotten approval.
They don't even know it's possible.
Glenn, can I just ask you, so I'm assuming that you would not have brought this before us as part of the little package of traffic things we're considering if you had a major concern. Is that correct, or?
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, that means something to me. I also just want to say there's absolutely any number of unforeseen potential consequences that we could all sit here for hours and identify as possibilities. But we're not going to know exactly how it would play out without some kind of trial. And I do feel strongly that we can't continue to pay lip service to the fact that we want a vital downtown and we want downtown vitality. We talk about it all the time. And then not take any step to try to increase the vitality of downtown. So I would just suggest, as one member, I'd be willing to put some parameters in place as a pilot to try this. And if it doesn't work, we have the ability at any time to pull it away. But I just don't want to now say we're going to wait for some future town meeting to create a bylaw and just never move forward in this area. I think unless the police department has a real safety concern or a need for a traffic study, which I would defer to them.
So we've done a couple temporary times. Royals done it a couple years in a row. And they've done it, I think, a couple nights a week through the holiday season. Absolutely got no complaints whatsoever. I know this is obviously a little bit longer, but I agree 100%. You don't want to do it first, see how it runs. But that's the busiest time of year when the Royals was doing it. And again, there was no safety issues, no complaints.
And I know the Draper Block at their opening, some of us attended, they did it.
They did.
You guys did it.
We've done it. We have done it there, yes.
I can second what Annie says with some caveats around it, I guess. I don't see this issue significantly different than what we do with outdoor seating for downtown businesses. We lease outdoor seating to downtown businesses and restaurants on public sidewalks. And we have an application process. They submit a plan. There's a one-year license. They renew every year. Is that right? They come back in front of us. I think we could, and have been guilty in the past, we could study this to death. And we could talk about it and put plans in place. Or we could do a trial period for 3 months, pick a length of time, 6 months. Andrew said we can withdraw this at any time we want. The one thing I would like to see, and I'm going to suggest that we table this tonight and bring it back for the next meeting, I would like to see a circulation route of where do the valets go? How do they get out? How do they circle back around? How do they pull in? I think there should be a clean application like the outdoor seating with a plan in place that shows the circulation route, gives the name of the company who's going to be running the service, that type of thing. But I think to do a 3 or 6 month temporary permit and see how it works, I think it could benefit downtown.
So I'm very much in favor of this. I'm more than happy to defer to the board on the circulation route, but I think the principle of why we want to see this exists regardless of that. The best way to reduce parking issues and traffic in downtown Andover is not to have businesses want to come to downtown Andover, to attract people to downtown Andover. So I think we need to be respectful of the other businesses, but at the same time, it's not as if we haven't given other businesses, and correct me if I'm wrong, not as if we haven't given other businesses in Main Street the opportunity to apply for valet parking. And I think that to Annie's point, if we want to be serious about having a vibrant downtown, these are things that are very typical in municipalities that we need to consider. I'd also want to say that if the concern is traffic, if I'm understanding correctly, Paul, the point of this valet service is to mitigate that traffic. So instead of having a bunch of people pulling in front of La Fina, not seeing parking, slowing down, doing loops around trying to find parking, instead you're directing people who actually know where the parking is to do that for those patrons. And so, in my opinion, this is a very reasonable thing. It's a very small percentage of parking spaces in a very distinct amount of time. And I also think we have to be considerate of the investment of the valet service and what that is and what the contract is. So if it's 6 months, that's great. If it's a year, either way, even if we say it's a year period and it becomes clearly a problem after a month or two, I'm sure we will hear about that and we can have a conversation to revoke the license in the worst case. Is that true?
Correct.
Current circulation is to enter and exit. You can do that from Central Street, but exit only on Chestnut Street. That's the current circulation pattern of that,
Of the parking lot?
of the parking lot.
All right, I think I've given everybody at least one opportunity to speak this evening, and I think if I'm hearing the board correctly, that we're going to put this over for a second reading. Am I getting that correctly?
So what is the additional information we want?
I'd like to see
the
a
traffic-
circulation.
The circulation
Yeah.
plan,
Just
just
to-
to be clear, so we know what we're asking for.
There's a written application.
I was going to say, are we going to require a written application or something similar to what's done with the outdoor dining? Isn't there an application for the outdoor dining?
Happy to work with Andy's office to draft one up.
I mean, that makes sense to me to treat this in the same way as that it's use of public property by a private business to hopefully benefit everyone. All right, so I don't know if we need a motion to continue this or just add it to the...
Regular business.
So it would be on the December 2nd?
All right, next thing on the agenda